In business this week, 3 things to know. First, for hundreds of thousands, it's back to work, so hold on to your stapler.
Here, let me just go ahead and get that from you.
Classic movie Office Space. Jobs surge in the latest unemployment report, and the market rallies on the news. We'll ask who's getting the jobs and why so many are still not looking. Then, Hong Kong clash. Protesters call off talks with the government after they skirmish with police. What happens next? And corporate get-together. Mergers are up, especially among healthcare and technology companies. How investors like you could benefit. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz, and welcome to Weekend Exchange. 5.9%. That's the headline number from Friday's jobs report. The unemployment rate dropping to its lowest level in 6 years, though its relevance is a little bit questionable right now. The key points, though, from this number: 248,000 jobs were created in September, and employers are adding 226,000 jobs a month. That's a pretty healthy clip. But the participation in the labor market is now the lowest since 1978 at just 62.7% of the working age population. And there remains little to no wage inflation, meaning people like you and I are not getting paid more. In a moment, we'll break down the numbers with Levanon from the Conference Board. But first, Wall Street did like the report, so here are the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing up 208 points to 17,009. The S&P 500 up 2170, and the Nasdaq up better than 1% to 4475. Taking a look at how the markets did for the week, however, down across the board. As you can see, the Dow, S&P 500, and the Nasdaq all finishing the week of October 3rd in the red. Top stocks we're watching this weekend. Alibaba is offering a generous stock compensation plan up to 66 million shares worth $5 billion. That, according to an SEC filing. Alibaba went public on September 19th. It closed Friday at $88.10. According to the Wall Street Journal, Google is working on modular displays that plug together like Legos, quote unquote, to create extra large TV screens. That's what we need. Google up 537. And Disney's top exec, Bob Iger, will stay as chairman and CEO of the company until 2018, 2 years after his previously planned date of retirement. He likes those e-passes you get at Disney. Disney closing Friday at $88.45. And taking a look at commodities, gold closing down. By the way, that is the lowest level in 4 years for gold. And oil back $1.33, now below $90 a barrel to $89.68. Levanon is with the Conference Board, and he is here to talk about jobs and a recent report the Conference Board did on sectors with a labor shortage. Gad also writes a blog called The Human Capital Exchange. Welcome to Arise Exchange. Good to have you.
My pleasure.
We started the show with that headline number, 5.9%. Is there any real relevance to the unemployment rate anymore, and why do we keep reporting it?
Well, there is a big debate about it because some are saying that it's not an accurate reflection of the slack remaining in the labor market. But more recent work from especially regional feds are actually pointing out that it is actually a pretty accurate measure of the unemployment, of the slack remaining in the labor market.
Yeah, so we should analyze the number a little bit differently than saying this is actually the total number of people who don't have jobs.
Oh, that's absolutely the case. There are a lot of people who want jobs but got discouraged from they couldn't find one, so they stopped looking for one. There are people who want a full-time job but they just got a part-time job. So yeah, and there are a lot of people who do want a job and
do you think that we still see so many discouraged people now, the lowest participation rate, in 3 decades? Because the kind of quality jobs out there remain low-paying jobs?
Well, so we need to separate between two things here when we talk about the participation rate. The main reason why the participation rate is declining is simply because the older baby boomer generation is retiring. Mm-hmm. So that's for good reasons. We want people who want to retire to be able to do that. But even in the working age population, there is a decline in the participation rate. And I think part of it is because, there is some mismatch between the skills of the people who lost a job and the types of jobs that are available now. But a lot of the people who stopped looking for a job, they also say that they don't want a job. That's another big group. And I think part of it is because wages are so low after 6 years or since the beginning of the recession of very low or almost no growth in wages, especially for new hires, that there are always people who are sitting on the fence between working and not working.
So the question then is, are we now creating enough new jobs, more than 200,000 a month, to start to eventually put some wage pressure in there? That's what I guess everyone is asking. When we talk about wage pressure, we mean pay raises.
Right. So there is this concept, the natural rate of unemployment that economists created, which is now at 5.5%. And the theory is that once the unemployment rate goes below 5.5%, we are likely to see wage pressures. And we are not that far away from it. Probably within 6 months, the middle of 2015, we're going to get there. And I think after that, we are likely to see wage pressure. So I think in the longer run, in 2-3 years, some of those people who are now discouraged and aren't happy with the wages being offered may return to the labor market.
I want to ask you about this interesting report that the Conference Board wrote on these occupations where there are jobs. Let's run through them a little bit. And any surprises there? Occupational physical therapy, for example, water transportation workers. This caught my surprise, religious workers.
Right. So what we did there was we tried to estimate in which occupations we are likely to see labor shortages in the coming decade. So a lot of occupations that were ranked high, meaning they have a risk of labor shortages, are in the health-related occupation, because with the aging population and with Obamacare, the demand for health services is likely to increase. So that's not a big surprise. What surprised us more was what we called skilled labor occupations, like water transportation, which is, by the way, not the people who transport water, but
is that like ferry operators?
Like shipping.
Shipping, okay.
Mostly and so shipping and crane operators and electricians.
And I imagine as the economy gets better a little bit, those are going to be more in demand. Gad, thank you so much. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you
for coming by. Turning to Hong Kong, protesters have called off talks with the government after they accused pro-government mobs of beating them and even committing sexual assaults. The situation grows tenser now as the demonstrators want Beijing to reverse a decision to restrict elections that are set for 2017. And they have demanded the ouster of the chief executive of Hong Kong, who is staying put right now. Rise News correspondent Tessa Arcilla joins us once again from Hong Kong. Tessa, good morning to you in Hong Kong. Let's bring us up to date on the situation.
Well, earlier, right in front of the chief executive's office, the crowd seemed to dwindle a little bit because overnight students were camped out over there. Thousands of civil servants had not gone to work today, and that was in Admiralty on the Hong Kong side. But across the harbor, there were crowds that gathered in Mongkok. This is a main shopping area on the Kowloon side, where there were clashes between pro and anti-Occupy protesters. Now, in the afternoon, when I spoke to some of those people who were anti the Occupy movement, many of them were genuinely upset at the disturbances caused by the movement. However, later on, it became clear that there were groups of masked men who would come in and attack some of the students. Now, this had made the Hong Kong Federation of Students declare that they don't want to continue talks anymore with the government, saying that the government had allowed violence against young people to happen. And towards the end of the evening, it really became very chaotic, and there were people there who, they may not agree with the methods of the Occupy movement, but they were very angry at the attacks that they saw on young people.
So, Tessa, what is the reaction then of the government to these talks so-called being called off? Has the government responded and said they'd like to try to get that back on track?
At this point, it seems like there is a stalemate. Basically, when the chief executive came out to speak last night, he didn't mention any continuation of talk. He just mentioned that it had stopped, and that he just asked people to please get off the streets, especially young people in uniform. That was the extent of the statement he had made with regard to the violence. Right now, it seems that there will be no talking happening, and the students are trying to figure out what they want their next action to be.
We're going into the weekend. Is there any sense of where this may now go for the weekend? Are we looking at a turning point here or a status quo?
It looks like it's going to drag on. I mean, the government, the chief executive himself, had said as much. It seems like the students will be determined to stay on the street. The government will want to see how this drags on. Right now, we also see some media on the mainland. I think I'm seeing some headlines here showing the chaos, they said, that is ensuing from all of this. And I think no side is going to back down. It's going to be very drawn out. out. They're holding their positions quite firmly. We'll see more of this through the weekend.
Okay, Tessa, thank you so much for the update. Have a good weekend. As it has in other parts of the world, social media is playing a big part in getting the word out in Hong Kong. The protesters are using a messaging app called FireChat in even ever-increasing numbers. John Gordon reports.
What you see right here amid the Hong Kong pro-democracy rallies, that sea of lights, is not just a sign of solidarity, it's also a mechanism of solidarity. On these thousands of mobile phones in the hands of protesters, a messaging app basically raised from obscurity called FireChat. It enables messages to pass through an ad hoc peer-to-peer network, able to work where mobile signals and Wi-Fi hotspots don't exist, or worse, are blocked. An added bonus when trying to coordinate a massive, loosely connected group like Hong Kong's Occupy Central, a free-for-all chat mode which can broadcast a local message across crowds like this very quickly. The CEO behind the app, Misha Benoliel, found himself in Hong Kong nearly by chance just as the protests kicked off.
I happened to be in Hong Kong in transit because I had meetings in Shenzhen with potential business partners, and suddenly a boom, an explosion. More than 100,000 new accounts were created on FireChat, more than 100,000 on Monday. I mean, so it's a complete explosion, and it's huge for such a city like Hong Kong. You have so many people that are gathered in the same place that the mobile networks get congested. The phones interconnect directly to one another using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and messages can keep on flowing from one phone to another. It creates a daisy chain of smartphones. FireChat is a big public chat room. Originally, we made it for festivals, concerts, big conferences, when normally you don't have any internet connectivity. And it happens, it's used this time in this specific circumstance, and it's not a surprise. For example, it happened in the end of March, April in Taiwan during the student protest, the Sunflower Movement too. We believe we have a fantastic opportunity with this technology, which is really paving the way of the new mobile internet. The mobile internet is going towards a complete decentralized infrastructure, and with this messaging app FireChat, we are demonstrating it for messages, but it can go much further than that for many other applications.
FireChat has seen a whopping 210,000 downloads over a 2-day span, propelling the title to the #1 app overall in Hong Kong. Over those 2 days, more than 2 million chat sessions were initiated. Coming up, it's becoming easier to tie the knot for companies. Why the pickup in mergers and acquisitions here on Arise Exchange. Stay with us. Global. It's Monday, so it must be time for a new round of sanctions against Russia. Nigeria is open for business, and you are getting a handle on this situation. Compelling. Time for liquid lunch, things that make us want to drink. Could she have been separated at birth from, say, Grimace? All business.
Money's coming out of these countries, and that flow is part of what's driving the equity markets.
Entertaining money daily.
It's about reimagining.
Arise Exchange. Welcome back to Arise Exchange. The market's urge to merge is booming. Multi-billion-dollar deals across a variety of sectors are at record levels, led by healthcare, telecoms, and real estate. So far this year, merger activity has totaled $1.3 trillion, according to the financial data company Dealogic. To talk more about these record M&A deals is Sarah Pringle, a reporter with the financial website The Deal. Sarah, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you.
What is driving all this M&A and activity after many years of there just being a dearth of it?
So there's a lot of factors contributing to this drive we're seeing. First and foremost is the really low interest rates. Now, companies are really able to really have the financial flexibility to pursue and back the acquisitions they want to go after. A second factor is shareholder activism. There are a lot of hedge funds out there and shareholder activists really pressuring companies to make moves, whether that be divest certain assets or put themselves up for sale.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned we're talking about mergers, but you have the likes of Carl Icahn who have, with several companies, urged a spinoff, for example, PayPal from eBay.
That's right, that's right. And an interesting note on that note is Allergen, which is being targeted right now by Valiant Pharmaceuticals, which is kind of teamed up with Pershing Square. And we haven't really seen that before.
Pershing Square, the hedge fund.
Pershing Square, the hedge fund, Bill Ackman's. So that's a pretty interesting case right there, and just one example of the huge or the large mega deals we're seeing in pharmaceuticals.
Are there specific sectors that are more, let's say, apt to merge right now?
Sure. Well, pharmaceuticals and healthcare has been huge in terms of M&A this year so far. Outside of Valiant, there are many others out there, and one thing that's driving this is pharmaceutical companies have done really well in the markets over the past couple of years. So now they're left with a lot of cash and really have the ability to use debt and cash to fuel these deals.
In general, and we have a full screen here of some of the record deals that we've seen just this year, as you mentioned, Valiant. There's Comcast, of course. Going to purchase Time Warner Cable, Facebook buying WhatsApp. In general, are these mergers that we're seeing good for shareholder value? Has it worked out?
It has been good for shareholder value so far. One thing that we are seeing is a lot of the acquirers, after buying these targets, we see their stock price rise. So for Facebook, for instance, they shelled out about $19 billion for WhatsApp, which is a huge valuation.
Yeah, for something that has no money.
For something that has
right.
no money. So, I mean, obviously we'll see how that plays out, but I think what they're trying to do is really compete with, the Apples and the Googles and
to diversify its product line. Of course, a lot of these mergers, at least we've been reporting, has been driven by tax issues and something called tax inversion. There is now a potential government crackdown on tax inversion when a company merges with an overseas company to try to lower its U.S. tax bill. You think that's going to start hampering some of these mergers, especially in the healthcare sector where we've seen it?
I mean, there's no doubt that it will definitely have an impact. How big of an impact is yet to be seen. And right now, we're really seeing deal makers on the street and policymakers in Washington, kind of at a tug of war. One thing that might be important to note is that European players might not fare as well as those in the U.S. because we still have a really strong M&A just on a domestic level. So that's going to help us out a
little. Are we going to see mergers for the most part really with big cap companies? Or are we seeing a lot of smaller deals that are just not getting the headlines that people maybe be able to play off of as investors?
Yeah, perhaps, and that's interesting to note. According to some of our data over at The Deal, if you're looking at the number of deals done this year so far, it's only an 8% increase year over year. But if you're looking at the total deal value in terms of dollar value, that's a 60% increase. So that's really an indication of the number of so-called mega deals we're seeing.
Okay. Sarah Pringle from The Deal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. JP Morgan Chase has confirmed one of the largest hacks in history. JP Morgan says hackers have breached the personal information for 83 million households and small businesses. This comes after an attack earlier this year. The bank says extremely sensitive data like account numbers, birth dates, and social security numbers was not affected by the breach. Another American added to the list of those infected by Ebola. A freelance cameraman with NBC News in Liberia covering the epidemic has become one of the latest victims. The 21-person production team have all agreed to voluntarily undergo quarantine. Also, the White House saying today that it will deploy up to 4,000 troops in West Africa to aid in the effort. Well, the recalls for GM just keep coming. Hard to keep up. The total number for the year, 71. The automaker announcing that it is recalling more than 500,000 cars, which involve Cadillac SRX and Saab 94X SUVs. The company says some rear suspension nuts may not have been tightened properly and could possibly cause a crash. The second recall covers the Chevrolet Spark mini car because the hoods can unexpectedly fly open. Oops. GM also confirmed that it has told dealers to stop selling the Chevy Colorado and GMC Canyon midsize pickup trucks that went on sale about 2 weeks ago until an airbag problem is repaired. In case you're wondering how tough it is these days to get a mortgage, consider this. Even former Fed Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, who now earns about $250,000 per speech and has a book deal worth at least $1 million, got turned down for a home loan. That's right. The mortgage market is still so tight that even Bernanke is having a hard time refinancing his home loan. Ahead, when you're trying to suppress an uprising, it's not helpful to have your spoiled kid taunt demonstrators. Our favorite person of the day is next.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
If I was to build my own news network, my own world network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city. I mean, it's kind of unrealistic, but how cool would it be to get local stories from the impoverished country, the impoverished city that we don't know about?
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
For Friday's Regulation Nation, a family in Louisiana spent more than 2 years and $20,000 fighting the local town government, all so their physically challenged son would have an easier time moving around. The West Jefferson Parish, along with the family's homeowners association, spent years trying to block Gerald and Carolee Cronley from having a specially equipped RV parked at their home. The RV is designed for their son, who has muscular dystrophy and is confined to a wheelchair. And what held up the use of the RV? 2.5 feet. The local zoning ordinance requires that motor vehicles be 5 feet from the curb, and the RV size only allowed for 2.5 feet. And the parish would not relent until the Louisiana Supreme Court told the town to do so. And now the family has its RV, but is $20,000 poorer, all because of Regulation Nation. And that brings us to our favorite person of the day. When we pick one person who grabbed our attention, not for the right reasons. Today, it's the daughter of the leader of Hong Kong, who is certainly not making a tense situation better with her spoiled brat behavior. Leung Chai-yan, the 22-year-old daughter of the embattled Hong Kong chief executive, posted a Facebook message mocking taxpayers who criticized a necklace she was wearing. She wrote, quote, "This is actually a beautiful necklace bought at Lane Crawford. Yes, funded by all you Hong Kong taxpayers. And so, by the way, are my beautiful shoes and dresses and clothes." But then she went on, quote, she said, "Actually, maybe I shouldn't say all you, since most of you here are probably unemployed, hence all this time obsessed with bombarding me with messages." We're pretty sure that tens of thousands of people marching in the streets are not obsessed with our clothes, but are more concerned with equal rights, something her father doesn't seem all that interested in. And so our favorite person of the day is Leung Chai-yan. Coming up next, President Obama and what he has to say about small businesses and what small businesses think about his economic plans. You're watching Arise Exchange. Last week on Arise Exchange, climate change made its way to the top of the agenda at the United Nations General Assembly, even as the world debates how to handle ISIS, Ukraine, and Ebola.
We're going to have some business leaders, we're going to have some global leaders that are going to say, these are the actions we're going to take.
The marijuana business owner / TV reporter quit on the air so she can go full-time into her pot business.
I quit.
Spreading the message of freedom, and I'm going to start with marijuana. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange. The economy is certainly doing better, and President Obama is trying to get everyone to take notice. But how do small businesses, which employ the majority of American workers, think things are going? Let's ask Kurtz, Open Forum editor at large, media strategist, and an expert on small business.
And friend of the show.
And friend of the show, thank you.
Good to see you, man.
Welcome back. Yeah. We appreciate that. So President Obama, of course, made this big economic speech yesterday because he wants people to know that he thinks the economy is getting better, and by golly, he wants some credit for it.
I think he's having a bit of a Rodney Dangerfield moment, no respect. You know, things are going relatively well. I mean, you look at the numbers, the stock market's through the roof. We've seen unemployment now drop, I think, below 6%. And he's out there. The problem is there's so much noise. There's so much bad news out there. We're seeing yet another ISIS beheading. We're seeing the Hong Kong protests. We're seeing Ebola. It's hard to get this message out. But things, you know, I think are ticking upwards.
But we're also seeing the economy, while certainly improving, people do feel a little bit stuck in the mud. And I'm wondering, when you speak with small businesses, if they're feeling the same way.
Well, it's interesting. Entrepreneurs, small business owners, they're optimistic by nature. That's why they're in business for themselves. But we are, if you look at the surveys of them, and I talk to them every single day, I'm an entrepreneur myself, there is that optimism out there. They're spending. I think the difference is they're spending in a smarter way than they were before. For example, if you're thinking of hiring, they might bring on some contractors as opposed to full-time employees. They're not fully sure what's going on, but for a lot of them, business is in fact booming.
Yeah, but there's an argument that this recovery has been the big corporate recovery, and that small businesses really haven't felt it yet. Do you think that mood is starting to turn around for small businesses?
I think the reason for that is you're seeing a disconnect both with small businesses and I think with consumers, the average worker. You know, we're seeing sky-high corporate profits. Wages aren't really going up. I think for small businesses, the challenge they're facing is that lending hasn't really opened up. They look at these big banks and they say,
well,
oh,
look, we just did a story that Ben Bernanke can't get a loan. I mean, if he can't get a loan, how is Joe's Deli on the corner?
Here, right. You know, what encourages me about entrepreneurs, as it always does, is that they find a way around the system. So I look at things with great interest, like Kickstarter, for example, where you can fund a business now. If you've got a great idea, you can just take it to the people. So there are alternative forms.
You say find a way around things, but small businesses are still, and this you don't hear President Obama talk too much about, tied up in regulation after regulation after regulation.
You hear them talk about it, though.
This president didn't start that, certainly. It's been going on now for decades. But he's not talking about that yet. Small businesses continue to talk about it.
Well, and it's a challenge because if you're a small business, you're faced with local regulations, state regulations, and often federal regulations. It's essentially a cost of doing business. The ones I see that manage it well, they have this can-do spirit. They know it's almost like a competitor in their backyard that they have to find a way around it. But there's no question that this is an issue. It's something I've seen myself. It's a challenge, but the great thing, again, about entrepreneurs is if you've got a great idea, you can take it to the people.
With the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, a lot of people have said small businesses are not going to hire because of this. Have we really seen that, though?
I think you've seen a lot of uncertainty. First of all, people still don't entirely know, does this affect my company? Do I have enough employees where I'm on the radar for this? I think you will see some companies that hire, sort of below that threshold. They'll bring in part-time workers so they don't have to deal with it. The interesting thing about this debate that's interested me for years is that most small business owners want to provide health care for their employees. In some respects, because they're altruistic, they want to help their employees, but it's a competitive advantage.
Absolutely, it's a competitive advantage. And that seems to be that I would think that there should be more encouragement of a competitive advantage. We hear about the living wage, a competitive advantage as well. But you have to give businesses the tools and resources to have it.
That's the big thing. I was talking to an entrepreneur friend of mine who's no fan of regulation, no fan of Washington per se, and just said, let me know what it is. Just let me know what I have to adhere to. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for small business owners is they don't know exactly. It's sort of a moving goalpost, and they don't know where they need to be.
When you speak to small business owners, what do they want, do you think?
Well, how long is the show here?
You have a minute left.
I think, capital, I think, is a concern. It's always helpful to have money, but again, there are more alternative sources of financing. I think
it's really interesting you bring that up, by the way, because the government has stopped the banks from lending, maybe an overreaction, and yet capital sort of finds a way.
Yeah, because there's this expression, I don't even know who came up with it. I don't think it was me. But, they say the best time to start a business is right now. Because if you've got a great idea as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, all this macro stuff, it has an impact. But if you've got a great product or service and you can get it to customers, you can make it happen. That's what makes this country so great for entrepreneurs.
Real quick, when you speak to small businesses, you think they're going to be more hiring through the remainder of 2014 and into 2015?
I think we're going to see an uptick. I think something like 2/3 of business owners are saying they're optimistic now, and I certainly have my hand on the pulse, and I see it in real time as well.
Okay, Rod Kurtz, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Very good thoughts. Monday on Arise Exchange, Europe's largest economy, Germany, making big strides under the Chancellor of Angela Merkel, why the rest of the world should take notice. Let's take a look at the final numbers again for the markets for this week. Red arrows across the board overall for the week. You know, we did see this big pop finally on Friday, but the Dow was down Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that's the result of the numbers you see there. Obviously, the market's responding well to Friday's unemployment numbers. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. We will see you on Monday.